Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and our special guest today, Khaled Reza. My name is Ryan T. Husk, and we are celebrating Aron Eisenberg. How you guys doing?
All right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk about a lot of different things. Talk about Aron, talk about Star Trek, whatever you guys have in store for me. Let's go.
Well, before we do any of that, you brought up a little tidbit before we started recording. You're like right in the same neighborhood as one Mr. Avery Brooks.
Yes. Avery is in New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey. I went to the same school that he taught. So unfortunately, I missed him though. So I could not find his residence.
Now, what'd you study at Rutgers?
At Rutgers, I studied education and I studied history. I'm a history teacher. So it was a
world history, American history.
The bachelor's program, it covers generally all types of history. My focus specifically was intellectual history. So I took world history classes. I took U.S. history because I'm a teacher, but I focused on intellectual history, which is that's a different conversation.
Intellectual history.
You know, there's something very interesting about history teachers, and this is why, I'm so fascinated. Personally, I'm fascinated by history, but also history teachers is we all know, history is written by the victors, as they say. But I had a history teacher way back in the day in Northern California at college, and he kind of had his own spin on history. It's not that you can't change the facts. You know the dates. In the dates, these certain things happened. But he said things in a way where we all were like, what? That's not how it went. That's not how World War II really started, But the more he talked about it, the more we kind of thought about it, we're like, he's just telling it from a different point of view. And it really helped to, open my mind up to, how we interpret history. So I was kind of wanting to know real quick, what kind of history teacher are you, Khaled?
For me, like just going off of what you said, I really focus on empathy when I try to teach history because if you know anything about empathy, it's about putting yourself in the shoes of others to understand them. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You could put yourself in the shoes of this terrorist in Iraq and try to understand why he's doing what he's doing. Doesn't mean you have to understand it. And I did a great TED talk by Sam Richards. He's an American sociologist called A Radical Experiment in Empathy. You guys can look it up on YouTube. Anyone watching this can look it up, 17 minutes. It's a great video. When I first saw it, it really disturbed me as an American citizen. The examples he uses to create empathy, but I got his point. And I showed it to my kids when we were discussing the dropping of the atomic bombs. And that's a huge controversial topic, right? And a lot of them were uncomfortable with what they heard in that video, which was exactly what I wanted. So for me, I'm the type of history teacher that looks for students to be able to put themselves in other people's shoes before they analyze or come to a conclusion, because it's very important. It's easy to hate the bad guy. It's a lot harder to understand him. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I really love about Star Trek, especially DS9 as well as TNG that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually something we were just talking about, Khaled, because we were talking about the Ferengi cultures and cultural practices, right? And we were actually saying, we were looking at it through our own lens of our own upbringing and our own cultural understanding of, how the world works. But when you take yourself out of that position and try to put yourself inside of a Ferengi's position, then you would say, okay, well, then maybe some of these things that they do that we look at as maybe inappropriate are totally fine and valid for them.
And not only that, Sirach, what's interesting is we as humans should be able to understand them, because the term Ferengi itself actually comes from a derogative term used to describe certain Europeans that would trade. I think in India, they would go into those areas and trade with the various regions, and it was a term that is derived from that, and they would be called, I forgot what the term was totally, but it's like Ferenge or something like that.
Yeah,
and that's where I think they got the name. I read on a Star Trek encyclopedia or something. I was like, wow, Like that's like fascinating. You look at a lot of the species, like the Ferengi and a lot of these other like Cardassians and Romulans, they really have human qualities to them. They come from they're an offshoot, but like an extrovert, like a pro wrestling, right? And pro wrestling is your personality, but like times 10. So it's like humans, but like times 10 with the Ferengi. So we should definitely be able to understand. I definitely could. So
no, we all can. I mean, there's different things, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because as you were saying it, it actually triggered my understanding of the same word that you're talking about, which we use in Ethiopia to describe outsiders or foreigners, and that would be faranj.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's the word. That's the word. Yeah.
The word is faranj, and we use that word in Ethiopia. I don't know if it's an Arabic word or
I forget.
or a Hebrew word, but I do know that our Ethiopian language is a Semitic language, just like Arabic and Hebrew. So it is probably a Semitic origin as far as the word, but it means essentially outsider or foreigner. And in Ethiopia, if we see, for example, a white guy walking down the street, we'll call him Faranj, which means
Faranj.
Sarak, please call me that next time you see me. I think that would be awesome.
So, but it's funny because now, as you said that, and it's funny because, I always say that the roots of these things that we see on Star Trek have real, real roots in our own reality, right? In our own everyday lives. And they borrow these themes and they borrow these things and they transplant it into, another alien race, but they're directly coming from our own existence, our own world, and how we live and how we live and coexist together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was a great point that you brought up, and it does sit well with me and it resonates true to me because, like I said, in Ethiopia, we use that exact same word, faranj, to describe an outsider or foreigner, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome. Love it. So I did bite my tongue when you mentioned professional wrestlers, because I totally wanted to be like, what's your professional wrestler, Sarak? But we gotta
what's my professional wrestler?
Or your favorite guy. Who's your guy?
Man, I'm an old school Hulk,
me too.
Hulkamania guy. I like the Junkyard Dog back in the day.
Uh-huh.
He was kind of my tough guy.
Yeah. What about you, Khaled?
The Undertaker.
Okay, well, he's still going.
Yeah. I got into the Undertaker at a young age when I was sensitive, so he met what I needed, and I love the Undertaker.
All right, so back to Ferengi. Sorry to change the subject there initially, but back to Ferengi. Let's talk about Nog, our good friend Nog. We just covered an episode called The Rules of Acquisition. We saw a lot of Ferengi stuff, learned a lot about the Ferengi. Khaled, what was your first impression of the Ferengi and of Nog? And preface that by telling us what you told me in the email about how you only started watching Deep Space Nine a little later on in life.
Yeah, so for me, my first encounter with Star Trek was on the CW when it was UPN 57. And randomly on Sundays, they would show like the original Star Trek. And at first I thought, oh man, this looks so boring. I was mad young back then, I was dumb. So I was like, oh, it's so boring. They're just talking. But I would just sit there and watch. I'd be like, wow, this is kind of fascinating. It's just like, I don't know why. My mind is just it's so interesting. And then I got to TNG, and that was my Trek for so many years until like college. And when I heard of DS9, I was like, oh, there's these other Star Trek. Okay. And I thought, oh, I don't really want to watch DS9. It's just on a station. Like, what's going to happen? I want to go places. I want to see planets. And after like resisting for like several years, going to my college year, I started watching DS9. I was like, wow, this is the first season was a little bit strange for me because you're just getting to know the characters, and I was already like very biased. My mind was already set that I'm not gonna like this. So my impression of the Ferengi it was based on TNG, and they did not leave a good impression. They just give me they're just so annoying. I was like, oh, Ferengi, they're so annoying. Like, how interesting could they be? But as I watched DS9, it got really, really good, and it's my favorite Star Trek show now. And the Ferengi in general, like my first impression in season 1 with Quark, I found them by the end of the season very charming. in like a very conniving type of way. I also found it very hilarious, very funny, like the comedic timing, which I'm sure we can get into when we talk about Aron specifically, was very, very good. They were good in a bad way, and I really liked what they represented because I felt they offered good commentary on just like on us humans in general. Like we talked about earlier, right? Even though they're aliens, I also see them like, hey, this is like a certain they're criticizing an aspect that has really been enhanced and created, this economic greed within the Western world itself, and that's where Star Trek was born, right? That we really know. A lot of the ideas of economics that the Ferengi share really come from, as far as we know, from recorded history, unless you guys know something else, from the Western world, which I found was very, very fascinating. I can get into more detail when we talk about Aron, we talk about Nog specifically, but that's really my early impression. I found them annoying. I didn't really like DS9 at first, but it's my favorite Star Trek, so there you go.
I love that.
Why is it your favorite Star Trek?
What time is it? I could spend a while talking about it. So I'll keep it short to like 3 main points. I thought it elevated Star Trek. After watching DS9, I felt TNG was a little too vanilla, and some aspects of like the relationships weren't as realistic. I can understand humans overcoming a lot of their weaknesses, but the fact that I just felt like they were so naive when they dealt with aliens compared to like DS9 on some of the things. But DS9, I felt like in terms of story, it was a lot more complex. The stories I felt they kept the Starfleet people Starfleet in the early seasons, but at the same time, they weren't afraid to tell these long form stories, tell these complex tales that went against what some people would consider against Star Trek, right? You talk about like Cisco, for example, having, accessory to murder. Like, oh my God, like a Starfleet officer, are you insane? But at the same time, like, I wouldn't say you understood it, but at the same time, you kind of like, okay, if humans were to be put under these situations, how would they react? Would they, did they really, we say they evolved, right? They're still humans at the end of the day. I wouldn't say, unless they're like a different species, I wouldn't say they evolved in that sense, right? So for me, like DS9 just was a lot more complex. I felt it had a lot more nuance. A lot of the stories resonated with me too. Also, right, I'm very religious. I follow Islam. I'm Muslim. So the fact that they brought in religion and they weren't bashing it left and right, like in TNG, especially those early seasons, really like I said, I didn't agree with everything, but at the same time, I was like, hey, Jake is saying the Bajorans' religions are stupid, but here's a Starfleet officer.
Yeah, come on, Jake, be a little.
Yeah, come on.
You know what? I got corrected by my father, who knew better, and he taught me better.
But for me, like, just to sum it up, DS9 for me, it just brought that religious aspect to it, but it also handled it so well. It also brought more complexity and nuance that I felt was needed because, look, the Federation's perfect, fine, but like you got to bring in like how would they react in like for real if they met these types of aliens, these Cardassians, these Romulans, the Q, the Borg, for example, right? And I just felt like DS9 balanced it well. It didn't go too crazy on this side. It didn't go too crazy on that side overall. And I just felt like the other Star Trek shows, I feel like Voyager regressed in that sense. I enjoyed Voyager personally, but I felt like Voyager kind of regressed in that sense because I just felt like it went back to that idealisticness. I still enjoyed it a lot, but like I said, DS9 just had everything I needed from a Star Trek show.
Real quick before we get into Nog, on the aspect of religion, I think the reason it was a little tougher, Star Trek was a little tougher on religions, was because Gene Roddenberry was, a very well-known atheist, and some would even say he was kind of anti-religion, and so original series in the first half of Next Generation would show that, would echo that, and then once he was gone, and other people kind of took over, you see that it was handled, a little bit differently. And I do see a lot of these arguments online where people say, there is no religion in Star Trek, and stuff like that. When I'm like, did you even watch Deep Space Nine? The entire series is about religion. What it is that Gene Roddenberry, sure, he's an atheist, or was, but Star Trek, as they do so eloquently with everything, they present things and they let us come to our own conclusions about it. They say,
Yeah.
here's some religion. You decide what you think about it.
Exactly.
Here's this theme. Here's that theme. But anyway,
well, and to piggyback off what you're saying, Ryan, those are the forbidden topics to have a discussion with, right? Politics and religion. You stay right.
And Deep Space Nine dove in first,
and then like that was exactly what we were talking about, like the exact things that are the do not talk about list, right? And it seems like our whole show revolved around those exact difficult conversations and themes.
And
yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and what I found appropriate, and this was more in retrospect, is I really appreciated that we had an African-American, Navy Brooks, playing the lead role when it talked about religion. Because African-Americans historically in the United States are very, very spiritual. You know, it was like their saving grace when it came to dealing with like being slaves within the United States. So I felt like, and that's what I just thought it was very appropriate having Avery Brooks. He was very spiritual, even though he had no soul, right? They were very spiritual. I really appreciate that. You see that in Benny Russell. You see that in those flashbacks, and so I really thought that was like a good blend. I don't know if they intended it or not, but it's just these things you notice in retrospect.
Yeah, and I also want to add to what you just said, Khaled, is the fact that they actually made him this emissary, this like prophet type character, right? For a black man to be considered in the same discussion of this high elevated respectful title or position, that was another thing that I think was groundbreaking.
Yeah, I love that so much, and I was so happy when the Federation was in Norway. I was like, "Yes, Starfleet in your face, enjoy it."
Yeah, I want to talk about.
I'm petty with certain Starfleet policies. I'm very petty with certain Starfleet.
Oh yeah, well the policies, right? Well, this it is the military code of chain of command, right? And so,
there is no military in the Federation, Jean-Luc Picard. It was a lie, but
oh yeah, that's
like
if you say so. But
don't tell me.
But let's get specific, because we are here giving a tribute to Aron Eisenberg, and he he ties into all of these subjects and all of these topics in so many ways. There's almost anywhere entry point. But give us a little bit of your perspective on it.
Can you be specific on what?
On Aron Eisenberg and the Nog
Oh, okay.
The role of Nog.
Yeah, so for me, I know Aron Eisenberg and I know Nog mostly from the TV shows. I am from watching like convention videos, so that's where I'm coming from. I haven't met him in person. I haven't been to a convention. So I have like a non-personal type of approach to it. Hopefully it has some value to you. So starting off, my first impression of Nog, I'll start with Nog because before I knew Aron, I knew Nog beforehand. My first impression of Nog was I didn't really consider him too much. I just thought, okay, this is like another side character, season 1 that's just gonna be with Jake, etc. It really started to take that he was more as a character than what I assumed going into the episode where he wanted to join Starfleet, and started to notice like when Jake's helping him with reading, I'm like, okay, he's featured a lot more prominently. He has episodes where he's featured like a lot of Ferengi episodes and things like that. And at first he was very funny. Like Aron's comedic timing is something that I enjoyed throughout Star Trek. Like it was very, very good. Even I remember when I first saw Aron without the makeup in that Far Beyond the Stars. I was like, wait, who with all the actors, but I was like, who is that? And he came in with that certain accent. I don't know if that was like a New York accent.
It was a New York, kind of like a paper boy. Yeah,
it was his rendition of a New York accent.
But no, but like again, his comedic timing I thought was very, very good. In that regard, I feel like Aron was perfect as a Ferengi. He was a Ferengi, if you will, in that sense. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the Nog character as well as Aron's acting abilities. The second thing that really like I enjoyed was in terms of Nog was the critique that he brought to humanity, like a lot of self-reflection. When he's talking to Jake, a lot of those arguments that he has with Jake, or when they're like not friends for like 2 seconds, That I found really valuable, you know, and you see that with Quark as well. But the Ferengi, I felt, really brought that mirror to Starfleet, to Ben Sisko, who was so assured with his Starfleetness in the early seasons against like the Maquis and so forth. So I really appreciated that aspect. The third and last thing that I'll mention that I enjoyed in terms of Nog is just when he became a Starfleet officer, you really saw, and I mentioned this in the email as well, you really saw how you saw the valuable aspects of the Ferengi that he brought to Starfleet, you know, and you, for example, when he's like trying to get that anti-graviton thingamajig, you know, like who else, like would a human being able to done that, right? You know, like Chief Miles O'Brien was like stressing, and he was like, oh, I got it, and he just did all this stuff. I'm like, bro, that's like super valuable. Like Starfleet needs people like you. You know, you're very resourceful. So he's, you know, he was very resourceful. And I just enjoyed him as a Starfleet officer. I felt like he took the good aspects of Starfleet and he gave back the good aspects of Ferengi, and that created a nice symbiosis, if you will. So that's Nog. That's Nog.
All right, let's hear about Aron now.
Yeah,
I love how organized your thoughts are. You're like, this is the third and final point on this section. We're like, oh, cool. This is the third.
Sorry, I haven't.
And now we're putting that chapter away and moving on to Nog, or to Aron. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so my first encounter with Aron was not in video format. That was the second. The first is through Memory Alpha. I would read those episodes at the bottom when when the actors are talking and whatnot. And one of the impressions, and I don't know, you guys can correct me, because you guys know him much more than I do. I felt like a certain earnestness from Aron, a certain earnestness when it came to acting, when it came to doing those roles, doing certain scenes. That the scene he did with Ben Sisko, I mean, Avery Brooks, the scene he did with Avery Brooks when he was going to go, and it's like a very, like, one of the most dramatic scenes in DS9, and one of the most heartfelt scenes in DS9. And it caught me off guard because I was like, wait, is this a Ferengi speaking right now? You know, so that aspect, like, I was like, huh, this is how he practiced with Avery, according to these texts that I'm reading, which this is how he engaged and he wanted to do this scene. Okay, he seems very earnest. He seems very like he has something to prove. So I got that impression from him. I don't know what you guys think. You guys can comment on it after I get my other 2 points done. So that's one. The second, I don't mean to like order you guys around. I apologize.
No, you got it. Keep going.
The second thing is I did watch a couple of convention videos. So he definitely seems like so happy to be there. He has a certain energy that I've only seen in like supernatural conventions. And he really like enjoys engaging. I really like it's like as a person that watched DS9 and me realizing like, oh wait, DS9 happened like 10 years ago. Like, no, like how can this be? Like I came in super late. I'm like, and it's, so I'm just thinking to myself like, the energy that he brought to these conventions that I've seen, the way he answers questions and engaged with the fans, really brought like a positive energy. It just showed me like some of the similarities between him and Nog, and some of the similarities between that he brought to him to that character. And that really, as a fan, that really enhanced my enjoyment of DS9. So when I go back, and I went back, like I've watched DS9 so many times, like over and over. Like I don't even know how much I watched it. I watched it every day, literally every day for like the last 2 years. Like some point when I'm eating. It's just like a comfort. It's like comfort for me just to watch it. But you know, going back and watching some of the scenes that Aron did because of how he interacts and talks and how happy he's there, it just as a fan makes me feel good. So he's brought that aspect to me too, and I love it when actors do that, bring that earnestness, bring that excitement. I feel like it enhances you, and it also gives you makes you feel like what you're doing is worthwhile as well. So that's where I've encountered Aron in a second format. The third format is obviously in this show. I randomly found the show. I was very thirsty for new DS9 content. So when the doc came out, I was super happy. And then I found out, wait, there's a show where like you have fans as well as like actual actors from DS9 talking about it. I was like, I gotta watch this. And then Aron, and so I saw Aron. I saw like a number of episodes. Unfortunately, when I came on, not soon after Aron passed away. So that kind of was there as well. Watching those reviews and getting a lot of his insights, what I found out, and I kind of mentioned this in the comment sections as well in the live streams, that you guys upload on YouTube, is Aaron and I, we have a lot of similar like analysis when it comes to Star Trek. We have a lot of similar ideas, and I feel like he brings a lot of honesty and directness. You know, he's not going to try to. He has, at least from what I've seen from the episodes that I've noticed, he hasn't tried to fluff up or misrepresent. I feel certain topics he will be to the point and of like he would talk about like, you know, I think he brought up the point where that last episode, In the Hands of the Prophets, when you guys were talking about that, he was like, you know, about Keiko, saying like, you know, it's science, not religion or philosophy or something like that. And then I think Aaron pointed it out, like, you know, Kira had a point, like, you know, in a certain way, science can become a philosophy or a religion in a certain way, right?
Sure.
And I feel like, well, that's the exact type of insight I had. So we have very much similar thought processes. So for me, you know, just to sum up, point number one, I felt that he was very earnest and very like eager to prove himself in a certain way. And he wanted to do his best in his acting, and when he talked about that episode, he was on Voyager too. And this is from Memory Alpha. You know, he said yes immediately to the role. He wanted to do the role. He wanted to do this role. And
of course.
So, yeah, so I was like, that makes me want to watch that episode now because I already like you. I like your attitude. You're earnest. I want to watch the episode. When I rewatch it, it just gives me a different appreciation. Because the first time I watched that episode, he's on Voyager, it was just another random episode. Okay, it was just an episode. But when I rewatched it, like after reading that from the episode summary, I'm like, oh, okay, let me go rewatch it. And I was like, okay, it just has a different emotion. Second is I like the way he's always positive with his fans, the way he interacts with his fans. That I feel that a lot more actors need to do. Get on the ground with the regular folk, if you will, from the conventions. And number three, we have a lot of similar analysis and thoughts on Star Trek, which made me connect with him even more. And that creates a symbiosis between me, Aaron, Nog, and Star Trek in general. It just creates a deeper appreciation, a different positivity, which is why I keep watching Star Trek. And I love the Ferengi episodes.
You know, one thing you touched on there that we don't discuss maybe nearly enough is that Aaron wasn't just a Star Trek actor, but he was also a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a really good point about that. And that it's so true that he really, really and powerfully believed in Star Trek and was a huge Star Trek fan. And he loved the other Star Trek actors, and he loved talking about Star Trek, and he loved watching Star Trek. Sirach, did you ever, we're actually almost out of time, but Sirach, did you ever get that feeling from Aaron while you were still on the show that he was a huge Star Trek fan, or did he only become more of a fan like later on in life?
Yeah, we never really had a discussion about whether he was a big fan of Star Trek. It was a question they asked me when I was auditioning for the role of Jake. They asked me, do you watch Star Trek? Do you know about Star Trek? And I really didn't know much about Star Trek. The original series was a little scary for me as far as just like the music theme song. And it was a little like off-putting for me as a kid. So I stayed away from it thinking, all right, this is some scary stuff to watch. It'll be a nightmare. And then going older with The Next Generation kind of was during my time, but I wasn't into Star Trek. My good friend upstairs, Damon, was always telling me about it. And so I ended up getting to know Marina Sirtis, which I only started watching because of Marina, essentially. I thought she was attractive. Something I told her when I first got on. I was like, hey, look at that. Counselor Troy. Hello. And so that was what's really got me into it. You know, Aaron was clearly a fan of acting, right? So like being an actor, you know, delivering a good performance was, to me, the thing that we talked about most. That was all he was concerned about while we were rehearsing scenes, was getting it right, nailing it the way he wanted to, and making sure that, you know, it came across flawlessly. So he was more into just that to me than just like, all right, well, we're telling the Star Trek story. It was more just about telling the story being a guy.
Definitely.
He became more of a fan later on in life once he really soaked up the whole culture and the fandom and the community of it. Tell you what, we are just about out of time here. Khaled, thank you so much. Your thoughts are so organized and well informed. It was really cool. I felt like I was a student for a minute there. I kind of wanted to pass a note over to Sirach, just because it felt like we were in class for a minute there.
Well, there's, what, I like learning things, and I'm glad that, you opened my eyes to the whole Ferengi and where the name origin comes from. I kind of go through these same kinds of thought processes as you when it comes to watching things, because I like to know more about contextually where writers are pulling their information from. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I addressed to Ira in the documentary that didn't make it in was where they came up with the names of Jake and Benjamin, which are obviously in the Old Testament. And, they weren't just randomly picked, right? Jacob and Benjamin are biblical names. And so I like hearing these kinds of tie-ins to historical facts, right? And how Star Trek likes to borrow and for what reason they borrow. Mm-hmm. We also see a lot of these, a lot of the evidence of them pulling from things when they use their titles for episodes.
Oh, yeah.
And so, even when you watch Discovery, a lot of the Discovery episodes have a title that's directly relative to something, in the past, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Khaled, because that's important for people to kind of do their own little homework and research on, because it does come from a place of truth, and it does come from, our own everyday experience.
One more quick thing about that Ferengi thing and Ferengi, there's also the word foreigner, which also has a G and an N right next to each other. Just so there's a very good likelihood that came from somewhere in there too. Like it's all kind of connected, that Mediterranean and Latin and Semitic languages kind of floating around. Anyway, thank you so much, Khaled. That was really cool. Very insightful. And thank you as always, Sirach Lofton. My name is Ferengi. Always remember the 7th rule.